In this lab, we're going to be creating and configuring an Amazon Elastic File System or Amazon EFS. The main idea about the Elastic File System or Amazon EFS is that it can be accessed by multiple systems at the same time. The scenario that we're going to have here is we're going to have two already created instances. One is going to be instance A, is going to be in one availability zone, and that availability zone is going to be US West 2A, and instance B is going to be located in another availability zone. In this particular case, I'm showing US West 2B. So both of those systems are going to be able to access the files systems the file system once I create it, and so they will be able to access it at the same time. But this file system is not created right now, but the two EC2 instances are. As part of the configuration of the EFS, I'm going to be in the different subnets where we want the presence of this file system. We're going to have to create what's called as a mount target. The idea of the mount target is that it's basically a network interface, and that network interface will be placed in the different subnets where we want to have access to the file system. Remember that EFS is compatible with Linux, so these two EC2 instances have to be running Linux. If we had a Windows system, that Windows system wouldn't be able to access the Elastic File System. If you have a Windows system that you need to have access to a file system, for that particular case, you need to use Amazon Lustre for Windows servers. Okay, so like I said, in this case, we're going to have the two EC2 instances in two different availability zones. We're going to create a common file system that will be accessible by both of those machines, provided that we create mount targets in the different subnets where the EC2 instances are located. And remember that the main advantage of the file system or something like EFS is that we can access it at the same time by different EC2 instances. Okay. So let's begin with the steps to create that. So let me bring my management console and log in. Okay, so I have the management console. Remember, in this case, whenever you see the three prompts, that means that you're logging in as a user instead of logging in as root. Whenever you log in as root, you're going to be able to enter only the email address and the password of the root user. So in this case, the username is going to be student, and then I need to get the password and sign in. By the way, the names of the computers that we're going to see there are not going to be the names that I showed you a moment ago. They're going to be different names, but that should be fine. Okay, so waiting a moment before this is ready. Okay, this is ready. I just want you to be aware that in this particular case, we're in the Oregon region, which is US West 2. You can see here, US West. This is the region where we're going to be create. This is the region where our two virtual machines are created, and also where our EFS volume will be file share will be created. Okay, so now that we have that, something important that I did not mention about the EFS file share that I'm going to be creating is that EFS file share needs to have a security group attached to it, so that we can accept the type of traffic that the EFS needs to accept from the EC2 instances that we want to have send traffic to the file system. Okay, so I'm going to show you first of all the two EC2 instances. So let me go to the EC2 dashboard, and then I'm going to show you the two EC2 instances. going to be these two. Okay, here are the two EC2 instances. One is called Retrieval instance, and the other one is called Cloud Academy. If I want to see the name of these EC2 instances, if I select the different EC2 instances, if I put a checkbox here, you will see the details appear below. So in this case, we can see that EC2 instance is called the Retrieval instance. And if I want to take a look at the other one, I need to uncheck this one and select this one. This is going to be Cloud Academy My Labs. So you can see that we have two EC2 instances. The first thing that I'm going to do regarding this lab is I'm going to be creating the security group that we are going to need for the EFS file share. That is the first thing that I'm going to be creating. So we go to security groups. Oops, let me see. Security groups is here. And we can see that we have two security groups. One is the security group that is was created by default in the default VPC. And the other security group is the one that we are going to be using with our two EC2 instances. So in this case, you can see that we have EC2 instance security group. And so this is used by both of those two EC2 instances. So as I mentioned before, I need to create a new security group that will be attached to the EFS file share before I use it. So in this case, I'm going to give it a name. It's going to be called filesystem -sg for security group, and we're going to say that this is for accessing to elastic file system. And remember that security groups, just like EC2 instances, just like subnets, they need to belong to a VPC. In this case, we only have one VPC, and that's the default. If you remember, in any region that you visit will have a default VPC that was created by AWS. So in this particular lab, we're not going to be use like a custom VPC. We're going to be using the one that's used for most of the time. We use this for testing and that type of stuff. But like I said, there is not another VPC. We could have had a different VPC, but in this case, the default is going to do the trick. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I need to work with remember, there's inbound rules and outbound rules associated with security groups. Whenever we're working with EC2 instances, most of the time we only work with inbound rules because we want to allow all traffic out from our, we want to allow any traffic that is initiated by the EC2 instances that are protected by this security group. We want to allow all the traffic out. But traffic that comes in is the one that we want to limit. So in this case, if you remember, the Elastic File System, that uses a network protocol called Network File System, or NFS for short. So what I need to do is I need to specify that I want the NFS protocol, NFS, and I want to, and then whenever you type in NFS, you see that the port number populates here automatically, and it's 2049. And then, as I mentioned before, we need to indicate where do we want to allow the traffic, what type of traffic we want to allow into our Elastic File System. So in this case, what I'm going to do is those EC2 instances, the two EC2 instances that are that you saw on the EC2 dashboard, those two EC2 instances have a security group. What we're going to do here is, instead of specifying anywhere, which means that we want to give access to this file system to the internet, we don't want to do that. We want the traffic to come from a specific security group, and that's going to be the security group that's attached to the EC2 instances that we saw earlier. So I'm going to select custom, and now you can see that I cannot see the security group of those two EC2 instances. In order to do that, I'm going to have to click here, and then once I click here, you can see that it's expanding the options that I have available. So in this case, I'm going to select that I want to allow traffic from the security groups that's attached to the two EC2 instances. Okay, and well, let me see. Well, we can see two. Just a moment. Let me add the rule. Okay, that should do it. So in this case, this is going to be the security group from which we're accepting traffic, and I'm going to type right next to it the name of that. So, okay, so I'm going to say to accept NFS traffic from security group of the EC2 instances. Okay, so now that I have done this, I'm going to click on the create security group. And it says here that the security group has been successfully created, which is great. So let me quickly show you that the security group that is attached to the two EC2 instances that I showed you a moment ago. If we take a look at because I told you that we're going to trust the security, we're going to trust traffic coming for anything that has attached a specific security group. And so if I want to take a look at the security group attached to the two different EC2 instances, again, I need to select this, the EC2 instance that I want to work with, so then I can see the information down here. In this case, I'm going to select this one. And security groups is part of the security tab, so I'm going to go to security. And here you can see it says Cloud Academy Labs -SG. And this is the same security group that we saw earlier. So we're accepting traffic from anything that has this security group attached to it. And then the second one, if I select the second one, by the way, if I click these two, you see that it doesn't show me information about the second one. It's showing me kind of like combined information between the two EC2 instances. So I need to remove the checkbox from here. And now you can see that the second one has the same Cloud Academy Labs security group. And that's the way it should be. Okay. So the next step that we're going to do is we're ready to create our elastic file system. So I can just simply type in EFS. And you can see EFS here. Okay, next step I need to follow here is create the file system. So I click on create file system. Oops. And then I need to give it a name. So the name I'm going to give it is going to be lab file system. And remember, I only have one single VPC, and that's the default one. So you can see that's the one that's selected. So, but if you had a second one, if you had a custom one that you're using, you had to select it from here. And the next thing what we're going to do is we're going to do some further customization of our EFS. And basically, we're just going to disable automatic backups, and we're also going to disable encryption at rest. Remember that in a production environment, you want to enable automatic backups, and you also want to encrypt your data at rest. That's something that you should always do. Something interesting here that I want you to notice with respect to EFS is that there are different tiers, just like we had different tiers in S3. We also have different tiers we only have two tiers. We have the standard tier, and then we have the one zone. The standard tier, you're going to have multiple copies of your data, just like in S3. Standard S3 has 3 copies of your data in 3 different availability zones. So you can have something like this. But if you want to sacrifice, if you have a copy of whatever that you're storing in this EFS file share, you can store it in one zone only. But in this case, I'm going to select the standard. Okay. So now that I've done this, the next thing I need to do is just click next. I don't need to configure. Oh, let me see. Okay, so I'm just going to click next. And the next thing is, this is something that I mentioned to you before, and is that I need to specify the subnets where I want the where I have my EC2 instances, I need to specify the subnets for that. So in this case, you can see that there are different subnets here. But pretty much, so what I need to do is I just need to make sure that I create a network interface in the different subnets that I'm going to want to have access to. Okay, so in this graph, we're pretty much about to create these mount targets in the different subnets where we want to have the presence of this EFS file share. Okay, so this is what we need to do right now. So we want, in this case, we're going to want the presence of these mount points in the different subnets that we have in this particular VPC. So in this case, I'm just going to leave this as is. You can see that we only have two EC2 instances, and then you might wonder, why do we have multiple? Why do we have more more subnets than we have EC2 instances? It's because by default the default VPC creates subnets in each one of the different availability zones. That's why you have that situation. Okay. But in this case, what I'm going to do is I just need to specify the security group that I want to use. So my EFS file share will be accessed by the EC2 instances. Remember that there were two security groups when I showed you earlier. There were two security groups, and then I created a third one that was going to be used by EFS. In this particular case, these security groups refer to the default security group. That's the one that comes with the VPC, but I don't want that one. Instead of that one, the one that I want is going to be the one that's associated with my file system. This is the one that I created. Okay, so I do that. I select security group for the file system. You can see SG there. Same here, and also same in this other one. Okay, so by doing this, now I am going to limit the traffic that comes into my EFS. I know that I only have two EC2 instances, but I created 4 mount points. But in the future, if I were to create an EC2 instance in some of the other subnets, then I will be able to do that. And those EC2 instances will be able to potentially have access to EFS. Okay, so now the next step is to click next. And in this case, we're not going to do anything with the policy, with the file system policy. This is optional. So I'm going to click next. And here is some information about, yeah, these are the mount targets that I created. And now create. And as you can see, it's created the file system. So we're going to wait a moment before this is ready. Okay, this is ready. So now let's view the file system. And so let me see. So as you can see here, there is a DNS name associated with the file, with the EFS file share. So in this case, this is the DNS name by which we're going to connect to it. We're not going to be using the IP address because, as you can imagine, if you have different subnets, each of one of those subnets is going to have a different IP address. So it doesn't make sense to use the the private IP address in the different subnets. It's going to be easier if we just use a DNS name. Okay, I'm going to copy this name because I'm going to use it at some point in the future. So let me copy it. Now the next step I need to do is click attach. Okay, just a moment. Let me see. Yes. Oh, so if I click attach, the idea here is what I'm obtaining here is these are the commands that I need to use. By default, your EC2 instance, even if you have a mount point or a mount target, in the subnet where you have your EC2 instance, that doesn't mean that your EC2 instance will be able to automatically see the EFS file share. You need to do a few things before you can do that. So in this case, I'm going to copy this. I'm going to copy the one below here. That's the one that I'm going to use at some point. I will have to issue a command to be able to mount that that target. In this case, I'm not going to, like I said, I'm not going to use the. I'm going to use using the nfs client. You could also use this other option, but in this case, I'm not going to use the option above. I'm going to use the option below. And I'm going to mount via DNS. That's why I mentioned to you the this is the DNS name, by the way. Okay. And now I'm going to close this. And so we should be ready. Okay, so now that we have created our file share, we're going to remote into our EC2 instances. I can either, in this particular case, you can see that in my favorites, I have EC2, but let's pretend that I don't have it here. I could just type in EC2. And so basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the EC2 dashboard, and then I will remote into each one of the two EC2 instances. So then I can issue the commands that I need to issue in order to be able to connect to those EC2 instances. So then I can remote into them. Okay, so the first one that I'm going to connect to is going to be the retrieval instance. So I select it. Remember that most of the time you might have been, in the past, you might have connected to an EC2 instance by using SSH from your own computer at home. In this case, I'm not going to be using SSH because that's not the objective of this lab. There's an easier way, assuming that the policy attached to the group that you belong to allows you to do that. So in this case, instead of using SSH, I'm going to click on the connect in this connect button that I have here. So this will allow me to establish an SSH connection into this retrieval instance. So I click on it, and you can see it's bringing me to the EC2 instance connect, and this is going to be using SSH, by the way. So that machine that I'm trying to connect has to have configured SSH, and it has to accept traffic coming from the internet. This connection is going to be coming from the internet. We can think of it as coming from the internet. And remember that whenever you used SSH, whenever you were connecting to a Linux 2 or a Linux 2023, you always use the EC2-user. So that's what we're going to be using here. I leave it as is, and then I click connect. And you can see how easy it is to establish a remote connection by doing it this way. Okay, so now we can see that we're connected to this EC2 instance. It's Amazon Linux 2. We're connected to it. Okay, so this is what we're going to do for the different EC2 instances. We're going to be installing the NFS client on each one of the two EC2 instances. In this case, you need to use sudo to escalate your privileges, yum, because this is the package manager for Linux 2 in this particular case. The command is going to be installed, and then we want to install these nfs-utils. This will allow this by installing this module, we will be able to have support for that machine to be able to connect to the EFS file share. Okay, and then if you remember, in Linux, everything is considered to be a folder. So in this case, whenever we mount the EFS volume, we're going to create a folder, and we're going to mount or associate that EFS file share to this folder. So that's why we're going to create a folder called EFS. Next, we're going to display, after we do that, oh, actually, I made a mistake here. This one goes up here because what I have here is the verification, but you cannot verify unless you mount the volume first. Okay. So okay, so this is going to be the order. So we install the support for NFS. We create a folder because everything in Linux is a file or folder. So in this case, we're going to use a folder that's going to be associated to whenever we mount the file share. And this is the command that we're going to be using. We're going to use sudo mount, and there's a lot of parameters here. You can see here the file share. This is the one that we copied earlier. And then what we're saying here is we want to associate it to or mount it to the EFS folder. And after that, I'm going to issue this command, and this command simply displays the different volumes that are attached to my computer, and we will see that we will see EFS eventually there once if this command is successful. And then, oh, actually, there's something. Sorry, made a mistake here. I need to do, this goes right here. So before I do anything with this, I need to, remember this folder EFS is going to be associated with the file share. And so I need to change the ownership before I'm able to, at some point I'm going to download the file. So, so that's going to be done here. Okay. So I'm going to do this and I'm going to test it, and then I'm going to test a download. Okay, so now that I have done that, let's proceed to those steps. So the first step, as I mentioned before, is going to do the sudo install. That's that. It says nothing to do. It was already installed, but you have to assume that it's not installed by default, so that's why you have to issue this command. The next one, as I mentioned before in this list, is to do the mkdir. So in this case, I'm going to do mkdir and EFS. This is the folder. The next thing I need to do is mount it. It's going to be this long command here. Remember, I got this command from when I click on the attach button. There was an attach button right after I created the EFS volume. So I do that. Okay, so doing something. You can see it didn't issue an error, which means it must have been successful at doing whatever it did. The next, so I did this, the mount. The next one I'm going to use is going to be to change the permissions of that folder. I'm going to copy this, and then I'm going to paste it. Paste. Okay, so I have just changed the ownership of that folder again to being mine, as the user being EC2 user. And the next thing I want to do is I want to verify, make sure that, so let me clear my screen. So I'm going to issue this command, which is sudo chown EC2-user EFS, and it's a folder. That worked fine. Now I'm going to issue the command, which is this one, which is going to display the volumes attached to this machine. Oops, sorry. It's df-h. Oh yes, let me see. Just a moment, please. It's df. Yes, it's df. Okay. So you can see here, we have an EFS. This is the one. This is the one that we just mounted to that EFS folder. And you can see here, this is the DNS name for it. Okay. So that worked fine. The last thing that I have pending is to download a file to the EFS. So in this case, I am going to download So I'm going to use the wget, and I'm going to down, because this machine doesn't have a web browser, I need to use, actually, let me clear my screen. So as I mentioned, because this machine doesn't have a web browser, I have to do this like this. Okay, so just finished downloading the file. So now if I want to see if that file is there, I need to go cd EFS. So I'm going to access that folder. But remember, that folder points to that's where we mounted the EFS volume. So if I do a list, oh, let me see what happened to that file. Let's see, just a moment. Okay, so I was trying to list the contents of the EFS folder, which is where I mounted the EFS file share. But I noticed that I made a mistake. Instead of downloading the file to the EFS file share, I downloaded to my home directory. So I should have gone into my home directory. I'm sorry, into the EFS folder, and then issue the command related to downloading the file. So now by doing it like this, I downloaded it to the EFS folder, which happens to be the mount volume where I mounted the file share. Okay, so that's pretty much that. Okay, so now in order to continue, so I just took care of this EC2 instance. So what I need to do is do it with the second one. So in order to do that, I'm going to repeat the steps. I select this one. I'm going to click connect. You can also do a right click and click connect from here. So remember, you can either click the connect button or you can do a right click and click connect. Again, I'm going to log in as EC2 user. This is the second machine, by the way, connecting to it remotely using SSH, but using the connect feature. And I'm going to follow these pretty much similar steps. The only one that I'm not going to do is download the file. I should be able to see the file because it was downloaded by the other machine. Okay, so instead of downloading a file, I will be able to just do a listing of the EFS folder once I have mounted the file share there, and then I will be able to see it. But it's because the other machine uh, uh, put it there. Okay, so let's begin with these commands. The first one is going to be this one. Paste. Okay. Okay, so this has nothing to do, which means it had already installed the nfs-utils. I did not needed to do it, but you cannot assume that's going to be installed. So let's go. So that was the first one. The second one is going to be to create a folder where I will be mounting mkdir EFS. This is where I'll be mounting the file share, and then the file share is going to be exactly the same one as it was before. So I just copy this and paste and hit enter. Because it didn't give me an error message, it means that everything worked fine. Next thing I'm going to do is going to use this one, change the ownership of the EFS folder so that it's make it my own computer. And then I'm going to verify that I have successfully mounted the volume, df-h. And again, you can see here that the last entry that we have here is the one that's for in the home, from the root directory in the home folder, in the EC2 dash user folder. This is my profile, home / user. And then in the EFS folder that I created, that points to the file share. Okay, And then, so the only thing that I'm going to need to do right now is just test to see that the file that was put there by the other machine is there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to simply go to cd EFS, and then I can do a listing, and you can see that was the file that was put by the other machine. I could do something similar here. I could create a simple file. And so let me type in touch and then test from PC2 from EC2 instance 2 EC2 instance 2 txt. And now if I do list, you can see that there are two files. And this is the other machine, by the way. I have the two. One of these is for the first machine. This is for the second one. So if I do a listing on this is the first machine, by the way. So if I do ls, you can see both of the files. You can see the one that was downloaded by this machine and the one that was downloaded by the other one. Okay, I hope that you have enjoyed this. I will be posting this information in the notes about this video. And by the way, I will replace this by the name of the file share, your EFS. The actually should be the DNS name of the EFS volume that you have created. So that's what you need to do in this case. But I will be posting this, so then if you want to follow along, you can do that. Remember, with anything you have to once you're done if you follow along with me, make sure that you delete whatever resources you created, so then you don't get charged for having created those resources. Okay. So this is pretty much this lab, and I hope that you have enjoyed it. And so thank you very much.